All right, in this video we are going to be checking out the project specifications for Project 2. This is an exercise in 3 parts. Essentially what we're going to be doing is we're going to be exploring activating the space by placing elements in our format. As we mentioned, we have points, we have lines, and we have planes, and each part of this exercise is going to deal with one of those elements: points, lines, and planes. Okay, so first thing you want to do is you want to figure out what your monitor size is. If you've got a big monitor, then you might want to work at 600 by 600. If you're working on a laptop and your monitor size is rather small, 400 by 400 is probably a better option. Okay, for the first 2 point exercises, okay, you'll notice that we have point 1, point 2, and point 3. We have line 1, line 2, and line 3, and we have plane 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so each part 1 point, part 2 line, part 3 plane has 3 individual components. All right, so in the first 2 point exercises we're going to be using a grid. Okay, and I'll tell you how to set the grid up and how to work the actual functionality in the first demo on part 1. Okay, so you're going to divide the grid, you're going to divide your format into evenly spaced grid increments. And again, I'll cover that in the next video. That said, I'm suggesting starting at 5 per side, or 25 total grid squares. Now, this is an option, and again, I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next video. That said, you'll achieve more interesting results if you use a more stratified grid, say 8 per side or 10 per side. Let's see, anything else on that? You'll be using black and white only, no values, no textures. Okay, so basically we're going to be using black forms on a white background. Okay, I say in here that each individual exercise may have a black or a white ground. In other words, if you have a black ground, you'll be using white elements. It really doesn't matter. I think in terms of being clean, a white background is better. If you're kind of more of the dramatic type, then a black background is going to give you more dramatic results, but the end result is the same. So my suggestion, stick with the white background in black forms, okay? The goal is to activate the space. Now, again, there's no rules here, right? We're basically just trying to become sensitive to what happens when we put something on a ground, when we put something on our canvas. And then where does our eye go? How do we lead our eye from place to place? Activating the space is really all about composition, and that's what we do when we're designing anything with our headlines or images, our body text, whatever. We're trying to get the viewer engaged in our content, and we do that by activating the space, getting them to peruse through the layout, through the format, so that they become engaged. Okay, so this is our first foray into doing that. All right. One thing I do want you to stay away from is funky things like funky imagery, smiley faces, trees, birds, or other visually identifiable elements. People tend to kind of want to make pictures of things. We're not dealing with pictures. We're dealing with abstraction here, okay? Think abstract. And but stay away from patterns. Patterns are essentially geometric in nature. They have symmetry. They are the same on the left and the right, or the top and the bottom, or on all 4 sides, okay? And basically, patterns are stagnant designs. They're not dynamic. As we saw from our exercise in analysis of the ad, a static design is a little bit more, lack of a better term, boring, and an active or a dynamic design is more interesting. So basically anything with a repetitive pattern is a static design, so avoid those, okay? So in point 1, point 2, and point 3, 3 different elements, right? In point 1, we're going to be using circles, and we're going to fill the grid. Now, I'll show you a little bit more on how to do that in the next exercise. In point 2, you're going to be filling the grid squares with squares, and basically filling the grid square. I suggest in both of these that you play around with 2 different grid sizes, just to sort of play around with, the variables. In point 3, no grid, you'll be using circles, and you may mix circles of different sizes in the individual exercises, but limit your sizes to 3 different circle sizes per composition, okay? In the line exercise, in the line part of the exercise, we have line 1, which is filling the entire frame with 40 to 50 black 1 pixel lines, okay? And they'll be the height of your format. Again, I'll talk about that in the demo. And then you're going to remove parts of it using the eraser tool. Okay, and basically, so where we were using addition in part 1, in part 2, line 1, we're dealing with subtraction, taking away. All right. In line 2, we're dealing with no grid, and you're going to be using 1 pixel lines, and you can play around with putting them wherever you want, in vertical or horizontal. You can combine vertical and horizontal together. But again, you're dealing with, a line that's the full height or the full width of the design. And in line 3, no grid, use lines. You may vary the length, the width, and the direction. And so basically, have at it, right? In the plane part 3, again, we have three different components of the plane exercise, and we'll be using the path tools, and you're going to create 1 plane of a geometric nature per composition. Keep your shapes relatively simple. Don't cross the paths. We'll talk a little bit more about that in that demo. In plane 2, you'll be using the path tool, and you'll be creating 1 plane of an organic nature, okay? So again, talk more about that detail in the demo. And in plane 3, we're going to play around with the Pathfinder tool. Pathfinder tool allows you to combine different shapes, and unusual things occur when you use the Pathfinder tool. So these are some of the concepts I want you to explore: detachment, touching, overlap, penetration, union, subtraction, and intersection. Again, I'll cover this more in the demo. All right. In this case here, you're going to do 5 to 10 more exercises per bullet point, okay? So each one of these is a bullet point, and you're going to be doing 5 to 10 per bullet point. You're going, holy cow, 5 to 10, that's like, 15 to 30 per part. And everyone's freaking out. Oh my God, this is so much work. No, it's not. I will show you how to work incrementally and save incrementally, and you actually will be able to rip off 5 to 10 of these in 15 or 20 minutes per bullet point without any trouble at all. Okay, so don't get freaked out. This is what I've been talking about. This is the beginning of the idea of exploring with depth and development. In other words, you're playing around with variables and you're comparing whether you made it better or worse. Okay, you can't do that with just 2 or 3. You've got to have a bunch so that you have, a body of work that you can look at and decide which one is the best of the batch. Now, we're not going to be picking the best one out of this. This is an exercise. It's a warm-up. So we're not really going to critique the success or failure of these. We're just going to look at whether they're working better or not so well. Okay. So our format size, 400 by 400 or 600 by 600, but it will be a square. All right. We'll use the grid to divide the space into subdivisions. Your minimum number of divisions is 5 per side. That is 25 grid squares for the whole format. You can certainly do more than that. Unless otherwise noted, a grid will be used, which is really only the first 2 in the point exercise, and black and white, no values or textures. Okay, we're going to talk in a different demo about file management, because these you're going to obviously be creating a lot of files, and this is the nature of multimedia in general. Media design is filled with tons and tons and tons of files. If you're dealing with video, you've got 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 clips per video project. Could be easily more than that. If you're building a website, you can't even imagine how many graphics you need. You've got buttons, you've got backgrounds, you have multiple states of the buttons, you've got images, you've got slideshows. It goes on and on and on. And, in any given, as a matter of fact, let me just show you really quickly here what my website looks like. Okay, so right here, this is just quickly a number of files, okay? And now we've got folders full of stuff, right? And so we got folders on folders. So here's this class right now, Mat 135. These are the demos, okay? These are what I'm working on right here, right? This is just for Project 2. These are just all the files, and these are the final files. These aren't even all the composite files that go into this stuff. These are all the different files, plus, at the moment, the media is not in there yet because I'm making it right now. But point is that that's just for one project. And then, we can go on to, Project 8, and we'll see a whole bunch more. Oh, Project 8, wake up. Project 8, there we go. Media files in there, again, those aren't done yet. But, and then I've got feedback files, which are not part of this particular file structure. 5, 10 of those per project. And so and then it goes on and on and on. And these are just all the root level for just one class, okay? So, every one of these classes has, a whole bunch of stuff, right? There's just for, typography right here. These are all the files for type. These are the files for video. So file management is incredibly difficult and a very, and so we're going to talk about file management in a different lecture, okay? So you're going to be saving them all. Each part is a set, and again, I'll talk more about that. Let's talk about anything else. Okay, this is basically all the file management lecture. We'll get into that, okay? And then you'll be evaluated essentially for your intuition and your creativity, the depth of exploration, okay? And this is what you're doing all up in here. And then following the guidelines, did you use a grid? So on and so forth. All right, so those are the specifications for Project 2. All right, more demos coming up.